In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 5, the Apostle Paul gives some instructions to his disciple Timothy, and he says these words, "As for you, always be sober-minded, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry." A few thoughts on this short verse. As far as the first line there goes, always be sober-minded. I think this has the idea of single-mindedness. Taking the passion that you have as a Christian to take that gospel and preach it throughout the world, wherever you can, making Christ's name great among the nations, whether that's here in the jungles of Peru or whether you're in New York City. Single-mindedness. The great pioneer missionaries, they had this idea of inverted homesickness. When you make that country your own, where you see that the need for the gospel is the greatest. Before that passion, all other passions fade away. Before that vision, all other visions disappear. Before that passion, the passion of taking the gospel throughout the world, before that passion, all other voices are silenced. That is sober-mindedness. That is single-mindedness. The next little phrase right there, Paul says, endure suffering. It is very, very interesting that in the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, where Jesus is speaking to his disciples and he says, go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples, baptizing these new disciples in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In that command to go, it absolutely has nothing to do with personal safety. Personal safety is totally irrelevant. So if I get malaria here in the jungles of Peru and die, that's okay. I've died preaching the gospel and trying to make Christ's name great among the nations. The Great Commission has nothing to do with our personal safety. It's interesting, this next statement right here, do the work of an evangelist. John Wesley said this, "You have one business, win souls. Win souls." If you could just spend your life, your short life, let's say you've got 80 years here on this earth, in comparison to eternity, that's nothing. Man, I want to spend this life, my few years, winning souls. You've got one business, win souls. See those people behind me? I'm sort of the overseer of their souls, as the Bible calls it. I'm the elder, one of the elders of our assembly, and all of those people in the boat behind me, there's about 40 of them. They're all baptized believers in our church, some of them very new believers, and I'm to oversee their souls. I've got one mission in life, win souls, and then bring those souls to maturity in their faith in Christ. The last line here, fulfill your ministry. Fulfill your ministry. I guess, once again, talking about the ministry being making Christ's name great among the nations. Interesting. David Platt said this, "In a world where everything revolves around yourself, protect yourself, promote yourself, comfort yourself, take care of yourself. Jesus says this, crucify yourself." Those are amazing words. Crucify yourself. Give your life for the greatest cause that exists in the universe. Crucify yourself. Giving your life for what really counts. Don't waste your life. John Wesley said this, "I value all things only by the price that they shall gain in eternity." Eternity. What are you doing to store up riches in heaven? Jonathan Edwards, I think it was, who said, "Stamp eternity on my eyeballs." If we could just have an eternal perspective, everything would change. We would live life a whole lot differently. So, my encouragement this afternoon as I'm traveling upriver here through the jungles of Peru after just preaching for the last 24 hours in one of the villages, trying to do just this, making Christ's name great among the nations. And I falter and fail in so many ways, but I want to try to encourage as many of you who are out there, maybe listening to this at some point in the future, this verse right here, 2 Timothy 4:5. As for you, always be sober-minded, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. The Apostle Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthian church, said these words, "Woe is me if I do not preach the gospel." John Bunyan talked about the worth of a soul, and he put it this way: we esteem things according to the price paid for them. The soul has been purchased by a price that the Son and wisdom of God thought appropriate to pay for its redemption. What thing, then, must be a soul? A soul must have tremendous value if it was deemed worthy to pay the price of the Son of God to redeem it. Absolutely incredible. And to think our sin must be absolutely horrendous, horrible, horrific before God the Father if it took the death of his Son to fix the problem. That's incredible. If that was the price that was paid, that high of a price was paid, I ought to give my all to preach it, to write about it, to speak with others about it, to paint it, to draw it, whatever I can do, so that the world might know this great price that has been paid. And like the Apostle Paul, I should be screaming, "Woe is me if I do not preach the gospel." Hudson Taylor said this: "Oh, that God would make hell so real to us that we cannot rest. Heaven so real that we must have men there. Christ so real that our supreme motive and aim shall be to make the man of sorrows the man of joy by the conversion to him of many." Preach the gospel. Woe is me, woe to us if we do not preach the gospel. Martin Luther said these words: "I'll preach Christ as if he was crucified yesterday, risen today, and coming again tomorrow." I mean, just feel the urgency of those words. Living for eternity. John Piper says this: "But whatever you do, find the God-centered, Christ-exalting, Bible-saturated passion of your life, and find your way to say it, and live for it, and die for it, and you will make a difference that lasts. You will not waste your life." So many Christians, young Christians, youth, with many years ahead of them, and all the energy that comes with youth, and they're wasting it. Don't waste your life. I'll never forget the day that I baptized a 70-year-old new believer. And after I baptized him, he came up out of the water in tears. And he was just crying, and he cried on my shoulder, and he said, on my shoulders, and he said, "Hermano Miqueas, I've wasted it. I've wasted it. I wasted my life. I'm 70 years old, and now I've just now come to Christ. I've just wasted 70 years that I could have spent in a fruitful life serving the Lord." Wow. I mean, that was just, it was like sticking a knife into my heart as a warning, saying, "Micah, do not waste your life." Yeah, the angels in heaven are having a party, celebrating. This guy has been saved, and he took that step of obedience to be baptized. Awesome, awesome moment. But at the same time, how sad. Many, many years wasted. Here's a question that I want you to think about as you think about missions. Are the things that you're living for worth Christ's dying for? Did Christ die for you so that you could go and spend the rest of your life collecting seashells and playing golf? I'm not against those things, but we can waste our lives doing so many frivolous little things that really do not have any purpose and meaning and impact on time and eternity. What are you doing with your life? Since God is a missionary God, his people should be missionary people. Think about it. God had an only son, and he made him a missionary. He sent Jesus, his son, on a mission to this world. Now we who are redeemed by the blood of Christ, found new life in him, we have purpose and meaning in everything that we do here on this earth. Are we being people really with the same mind of God our Father, who's a missional God? We should be missional people. Listen to these words of David Brainerd. David Brainerd, missionary to North American Indians. He said this: "Here I am, send me. Send me to the ends of the earth. Send me to the rough, the savage, lost to the wilderness. Send me from all that is called comfort on earth. Send me even to death itself, if it be but in your service and to promote your kingdom." I mean, this guy, David Brainerd, he's saying crazy things. Send me from all that is called comfort on earth. I mean, a normal person that finds his home and his citizenship on this planet doesn't say something like that. This guy was a stranger and an alien. He was from a different place. Yeah. Robert Murray McShane said this: "God gave me a message and a horse. I've taken that message, and in the process, I've killed the horse." I think that's a great illustration of exactly what we should do with the things that God has given us. We should use all of those things, personal possessions. Really, they're God's possessions that he's loaned to us, but we should use those things in order to get the message out, to preach the gospel to the nations. Hudson Taylor said this: "God's work done in God's way will never lack God's supply." And that has been exactly our experience as missionaries in Peru for the last 16 years. I guess I'm being presumptuous to say that we do God's work in God's way. We're trying to do God's work in God's way. I hope we're doing it that way. And definitely we've seen God supply. And doing his work, he's going to supply. He's going to provide for it. Martin Luther said these words about personal possessions: "I have held many things in my hands, and I have lost them all. But whatever I've placed in God's hands, that I still possess." William Carey, the father of modern missions, as they call him, said these words: "There are grave difficulties on every hand, and more are looming ahead. Therefore, we must go forward." I am speaking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea. On frequent journeys, in dangers from rivers, in dangers from robbers, in dangers from my own people, in dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers from false brothers, in toil and in hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger and in thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there is a daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Those are the words of the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. And what he's doing is he's defending his apostleship. But in reality, you could almost look at it as a resume for missions. Those are the things that the Apostle Paul went through to make Christ's name great in the Middle East, and where he first began to preach the gospel as the early church sprang up all around the Mediterranean. Absolutely amazing what he was willing to suffer. What are you willing to suffer to make Christ's name great? What has missions cost you?